Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Mitch Galton, Director of Business Development at Urban-gro. Thank you very much for joining me today, Mitch.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
All right, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving us a positive review on whatever podcast platform you use. Finally, if you want to reach the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. And to make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right, Mitch. So I'd like to get started by learning a little bit about how you came to the cannabis industry. Where'd you start?
Yeah, so I started my career at Fluence Bioengineering, an LED company back in 2016. So the lighting landscape and general cannabis industry landscape was a little bit different than it is today. I actually left college to go join the team at Fluence. They were, much smaller than they are nowadays, but at the time, probably about 20, 30 people. I was one of the first salespeople. And I had the pleasure of working really closely with the ownership team and a lot of our, really larger commercial partners, all the way through facility design and, post-operation once they kind of got the lights up and running.
So you left college to join the industry?
I did. So I'd actually, I worked at LED companies like General Lighting in high school as like summer jobs. And I had been following kind of the horticulture lighting landscape a little bit because normal LEDs had taken over kind of the traditional lighting industry. But HPS were really efficient, double-ended HPS, and they were still kind of the last holdout to be replaced by LEDs. And it was, really that horticulture application I noticed was going to be really big for LEDs in the future. So I'd kind of been keeping an eye on the market, and I ended up, just kind of watching Fluence Bioengineer, BML at the time, and they kind of rebranded to Fluence, and they released just a really good product that was, at the time really differentiated and pretty, from a performance standpoint and price standpoint, just a lot better than the other LED options at the time. And I just kind of reached out to him. One of the owners actually called me. I was in my third year of college, and we talked for a while, and he basically said, we'll probably have a job for you when you graduate, but if you want to leave now, I'll teach you more in the next year than you'll ever learn in college. So, I thought about it hard, but I ended up I was at UC Santa Barbara at the time. I ended up leaving and moving out to Austin. And it was, at the time a little bit scary, but now definitely in retrospect, one of the best decisions I ever made. And to his credit, he did teach me more than I ever would have learned in the last year of college. So,
well, and I mean, you can always go back. You can be, after you retire, go back and get that degree.
Exactly. And I'm actually, I've re-enrolled in certain classes and stuff. So I'm doing some, as COVID has happened, I've been doing some online and going back and trying to finish it up. But, it was the right time and the right place in the industry. And it was a, phenomenal opportunity.
Do you think things might have been a little bit different? Like, now it's not that crazy to get a degree in cannabis. Had that been more available, is that something you would have pursued?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I thought about doing some horticulture. I was doing econ at the time. I like to say that even though I've really spent a lot of my career in lighting and cultivation equipment in general, I like to focus on photons and finance. So I think the econ degree the start of the econ degree did end up really being valuable in kind of understanding cultivation equipment and then what drives, different equipment decisions and just decisions when you're setting up an operation in general for cannabis.
So did you move to Urban-gro from Fluence? Were you brought in as an LED lighting expert?
Well, so I took right at the start of COVID, I started working for a tissue culture company doing tissue culture genetics. I wanted to kind of, lighting started to become commoditized, still a really exciting space, but I just wanted to kind of expand my horizons, get a little bit closer to the plant and plant touching side of things. But with COVID restrictions, it was challenging to travel in Canada. So I started, reaching out to folks and looking at groups that were really active in the US, starting to work with some of those bigger MSOs. And Urban-gro, I'd interacted with a lot during my time at Fluence. They were one of our largest partners at Fluence. And we worked on just a lot of really large scale facilities with them. They were doing kind of the irrigation or kind of early stage design stuff. And then we came in on lighting on the back end. And so, I started talking to them and it was just a really good fit. They were working with some really, really large MSOs and a bunch of really exciting groups. Lighting is a huge part of what we do. So I did kind of come on to help with lighting efforts, but on the same token, I work with a whole bunch of their other equipment, fertigation, irrigation, climate control systems, benches, fans, that kind of thing. So it was a cool way for me to, get beyond or expand my horizons beyond just lighting and just photons, while also still kind of being involved in that kind of early stage design phase that I wasn't able to participate in when I was just doing plant touching and genetics work.
Urban-gro does complete anything from consulting services to complete turnkey cultivation room construction, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, we do full architectural engineering, MEP, stamp drawings, cultivation design. And then, the kind of the follow up to that, once we develop the spec with the customer and kind of design these facilities based on their goals, is we kind of help integrate cultivation equipment, lighting being a big part of that, but benches, fans, and it all kind of goes back to that design spec. So, over the last year, we've really kind of started focusing more on those first mile services. We acquired an architectural firm just a few months back. And, we're through them, we're working with partners and some of these big MSOs about 3 months earlier than we would have otherwise through mechanical and MEP design. So yeah, it's really dynamic what we do here, and everything from turnkey to kind of an a la carte menu where you can just pick out certain services or equipment items that we can support on.
Are you seeing more interest in your turnkey services or sort of a la carte menu?
That's a good question too. I mean, it depends on the type of customer. A lot of the mid-sized, these new states where they want speed to market, they're going for the turnkey just because they want something that they know is proven, they know will work, get them to, whatever their production goals are and do it in a set amount of time. And going through one group to do all that is really helpful, just again, for that speed to market. Some of the bigger MSOs will do more of the a la carte items. But as we've kind of incorporated more of these design services, things like architectural, where we have a lot of kind of differentiated experience working on cultivation specific architectural designs and MEP, usually we've kind of started working with, or some of these bigger groups that we've started working with, they've started to kind of embrace the turnkey model a little bit more. So they'll start off doing a la carte, and then as they kind of start working with us more closely, they'll eventually kind of expand and do a full facility as a turnkey solution.
Can you talk me through the process of building an indoor cultivation facility? Where do you start? What are some of the common pitfalls? What do you need first?
Yeah, the first thing, and I think everyone kind of has a different way of looking at it depending on where you are in the process. And if you're really at the beginning, I think the first thing to think about is what does your market look like? How much do you want to grow? How much does the market bear of that product you want to be growing or producing? Thinking about really what does your end customer and path to that end customer look like, I think is the first place to start. And we work on a lot of that with customers that come to us wanting the turnkey kind of solution, because what we find is that a lot of people want a turnkey design, but they don't know exactly what they're designing to. And so understanding the design spec is kind of I would say the first step with most customers. And some totally already have that. They say, I want, this many pounds of production. I'm going to be selling at this price per pound. This is my budget for the facility. This is when I want to be online. And others don't have quite as much of that fleshed out. So we need to kind of work with them a little bit more closely.
Once you know what your production goals are, where do you move forward? And is it in terms of what the layout's going to look like, lighting, fertigation, stuff like that?
I think it's, from there, it's budget, and it's the one that no one really likes to talk about or think about beforehand. But really, there are a couple pieces that make thinking about budget really important. And, I equate building a facility kind of to like buying a car. You can put your dollars towards a really nice engine, or you can, put it towards a really nice interior. And it's the same with a cultivation facility. Are you more focused on getting really high light intensity so that you can, drive production that way and drive ROI that way? Or is it through maybe not quite as expensive, not as much expense on the lighting, but a little bit more of a beefed up HVAC system? So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of skin the cat, but it's about understanding what your budget is and then where you want to kind of allocate those dollars. And that, goes back to referencing your production goals. Are you trying to get the highest quality, or are you just trying to get, really high volume and get it out the door as quick as possible? What does your market look like? I think that's kind of one of the first things to look at.
How often are you telling clients that they have unrealistic expectations?
No, that's another good question. I think we always try to say, look, we'll build you whatever you want. Usually we're pretty, our customers are pretty aware of what their budget is. It's rare that customers come to us and say, hey, I want, the world, but I want to do it on a shoestring budget. And I think, one thing that we're good at as a company is really saying, okay, whatever that budget is, let's get you guys the best and most viable model or operation for that budget. Let's put these dollars to the most effective use. We'll never say, oh, you're totally not going to be able to do that. But we will kind of help you understand the levers that you need to pull and the trade-offs that you're kind of making with every dollar that you're spending.
I have to believe that you're learning something new with every new facility that comes online. Do you find yourself going back to previous partners and making tweaks as a result of learning something from a new project?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kind of learning in the cannabis industry a little bit as we go. We, as a company, we've changed a lot. Part of the reason we acquired the architectural firm is because we kept seeing all these systems that we were integrating, all the MEP work we were doing. We realized that it would, being able to tie it into architectural allowed us to make it a lot more seamless. And so we're constantly developing and trying to improve our value proposition and our understanding so that we can serve customers better as the market changes. I think designing a facility to account for a changing market, things like price compression, that's really important. So we always try to, build in some level of future proofing, and we're always learning. A little bit of a vague answer, but at the end of the day, it's definitely a learning process, and we do, constantly improve our own knowledge. And on the same token, technology is getting a lot better as time goes on.
What is MEP work?
Sorry, I should have clarified. MEP is mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So things like HVAC, the electrical in your facility. And a lot of groups, one of the benefits of having it in-house and having it be cultivation focused, we acquired an MEP group 2-3 years ago that had already done about 300 cultivation facilities. And as I'm sure, you and a lot of your guests talk about, HVAC in cultivation and a cultivation environment is just so different than an office space. Plants put out a lot more water than humans do through transpiration. And so, that's been, a big piece of improving our value proposition and helping customers become more successful with our solutions on the equipment side and on the service side is really making sure that they have, an HVAC MEP system and design that's catered to cultivation and kind of the unique aspects of cultivation environments.
Where do you operate? Are you solely in the U.S.? You global? Do you do most of your work in Texas? Where's most of your work?
Yeah, so I'm based out of Austin, Texas. Company's in Lafayette, but we're really active pretty much everywhere. We are doing a lot more projects in Europe these days. Over the last year, we've really ramped up our work in Europe. We actually just made an announcement with a vertical produce farm out there that we're collaborating with really closely, Urban Health Farms.
Yeah, that was for like 20 facilities, right?
Yeah, things are blowing up in Europe. It's getting really big on the cannabis side, but also the produce side. It's a major hub for high quality produce out there, and a lot of guys are moving or transitioning kind of from that greenhouse model that's really common in the Netherlands to indoor. We're seeing that in the US also, and we're working with a lot more of those guys out here, but Europe, it's really taken off. And obviously Canada is pretty big for us also.
How much of the business is cannabis versus everything else?
Another good question. It's, I don't have an exact number, and it would kind of depend based on depending on how you're looking at it, whether it's project number, dollar amount, revenue. We're actively and pretty quickly ramping up the non-cannabis side. And that's mainly because we focus on indoor cultivation facilities. And what I always say, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier with looking at your market, your inputs, your outputs, and your production goals, an indoor lettuce facility isn't that different from an indoor cannabis facility, other than the fact that your crop is worth a very, very different amount. So what you can justify on the inputs is very different also. And so we really specialize in just understanding indoor climate or controlled environment ag settings and applications. And so those applications for non-cannabis crops have been really ramping up over the last few years. So we're seeing a dramatic shift in what was 90-95% cannabis is definitely going the opposite direction now. or, changing directions a little bit.
Okay. Do you specialize in brand new facilities or do you do retrofits as well?
A little bit of everything. We really like the brand new facility because it's a lot easier to kind of meet a specific customer spec when you can start from the scratch, especially now that we have architectural, we can do everything from designing the facility to make sure plant process flow and operations go smoothly to MEP. It's a lot easier when we have kind of a blank slate, but we absolutely do a lot of retrofit work, especially as some of these kind of more legacy states, places like Colorado, California, in some cases, they start to kind of upgrade their equipment or look at ramping up production. We're doing a lot more retrofit work over the last year or two in the markets like that.
In retrofits, what are some of the common pitfalls? I've heard a lot about, contaminated buildings. Is there ever a building that you're in that just isn't workable?
Another good question. I'm sure there are some buildings. We've definitely, I think Oklahoma is probably one of those candidates for places with a lot of, pretty rough buildings. But in general, I think one of the biggest challenges is if you have an existing HVAC system, it can be really, really hard to upgrade. Lighting as an example, switching lights with a legacy HVAC system causes a whole bunch of challenges. And even if you have your light levels perfect, it may not be worth doing. So that's one thing that we always look at is, what are you specifically looking at changing and how will that impact your other systems? And we really try to be cognizant. And sometimes we'll say, look, I know that you want more light in here, but your HVAC can't handle it in the way that you want to do it. So we would recommend not upgrading in that way. And again, it's about allocating dollars in the best way. We just recommend that you allocate those dollars somewhere else to improve production.
Urban-gro has done more than 450 indoor cultivation projects that have ranged from 10,000 square feet to 1.8 million square feet.
Yeah.
What's the best one?
Best in what way? What would you, what criteria?
In your opinion, what's the crowning achievement that, you put on the pedestal whenever you're pitching a new client?
Another great question. It all kind of depends on, and I'll kind of clarify, not to dodge the question too much. We can't talk about all of our kind of big customers and name names specifically, but I really like the customers that think out of the box, but still keep it focused on kind of core metrics and core drivers of financial performance. And so we've done a couple of really big multi-level facilities. That's something that we're seeing, get a lot more traction over the last few years. People run essentially multi-level rolling racks with LEDs at close proximity. And it's a tough setup to make work for a lot of reasons, but we've had a lot of customers that have been extremely successful with it, which is really cool to see, because again, I think that's a good example of people looking at the metrics they want, which is canopy square footage, consistency, maximizing fixed cost absorption by, increasing canopy within a fixed building footprint, and then really kind of, taking a swing at it, but also, again, keeping to the metrics that drive financial performance. And so, I think we've done a couple, especially lately, a couple really, really large multi-level rolling rack facilities that have just turned out really, really well.
I've heard that some of those multi-level rolling rack facilities can be quite difficult to manage. When you put something like that in place, how do you help prepare the clients to set them up for success? So all of a sudden they don't have too much on their hands in terms of operations.
Yeah, well, and that's where it goes back to really understanding the customer's spec and goals from the get-go. Labor is going to go up in a multi-level facility because you're increasing, canopy square footage, and that's really what drives labor costs. So, again, understanding inputs, outputs, what they're trying to produce, what they're trying to spend in OpEx and CapEx. I think that's, we really let the customer's design goals dictate, the setup and the layout and that kind of thing. And we'll, again, help educate on the trade-offs, the pros and cons of different options. But it all comes down to what the customer feels comfortable taking on. And I think, one thing that we do to really de-risk it on the multi-level side is understanding the HVAC and the environmental control aspect of it. Because when you pack in twice the amount of lights, twice the amount of plants that are transpiring, a lot changes in the room and the environment. And I think that's one of the big hiccups we see that people run into, when they try multi-level without really kind of planning it from the get-go.
If budget's not an issue, you can put any kind of technology that you want in there. Is the best way humans watching plants, or is it cameras, AI, and sensors?
I think today it's probably a combination. The AI and sensors are great for some things, but it's always nice to have a human kind of double checking. Labor is a huge challenge in cannabis, and on the topic of cultivation equipment, a lot of it is really focused on minimizing labor, and I think that's what we will see over the next few years as some of these more sophisticated AI and data tracking groups get into the space. But I think right now, there's a lot of human element that still is required to really make sure these things go smoothly.
What are some of the things that you do to increase canopy while reducing energy consumption?
Yeah, it depends on the setup a little bit. Greenhouse, there's not quite as much that you can do. One strategy we have seen for greenhouse is a lot of folks are bringing early stage production indoors. You need less light, there's less transpiration, so you need less HVAC. It's a short plant, so you can have these things stacked up to 5 high and then bring them out into the greenhouse and really make sure that you're using all that sunlight, which is just free photons. And even though I'm a light guy, free photons are my favorite type. So using all of that to drive flower production is fantastic. A lot of greenhouse growers that run early stage indoors, or in greenhouse under glass, they'll still have to shade it. And so you're really just, giving up and actually blocking photons that could otherwise be used for flower. So that's one, kind of creative way we've seen a lot of greenhouse growers attack it, just bringing that early stage indoors. And then, multi-level rolling racks, is increasingly common. We've seen, for a while, people didn't really want to go above 2 levels. Then we saw people go 3, 4, I think there's a 5-level grow that we've done some work with. So, people really just pushing the boundaries on that, but it all comes down to, what's the land cost, what's the building cost, what's your labor cost. So, it doesn't always make sense in certain geographies.
From an R&D perspective, do you have an incubator where you can test new things, new products, new processes out? Or is it kind of waiting for the next client who's willing to take a few more chances?
A little bit of both. We really vet, and a lot of what I've been doing with the team is really, trying to find new innovative technologies that we can help de-risk for our customers. Maybe there'll be a vendor that has a really, powerful solution, but if you can't incorporate it into the lights or the HVAC and tie it all together, it poses a lot of risk. And we're trying to find things like that, that, differentiate what we're able to offer and add value to our customers, without, using them as guinea pigs. We really try to do a pretty thorough vetting process, and anything that we're not sure about, we'll always be pretty transparent, extremely transparent with customers and say, look, this is, you're going to be one of the first people to deploy this for cannabis, because most of this technology, the really innovative stuff, is coming over from, groups in the Netherlands that do apply it for tomatoes and leafy greens and that kind of thing. And usually when we do see stuff like that enter the cannabis industry, again, it goes back to customer specs and customer goals of wanting to add automation to the process and things like that. And so they understand usually that there is kind of a little bit of a risk or refining process to get that dialed in completely.
You mentioned Urban-gro's partnership with Fluence. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of partnering with OEMs and some of the other partnerships that you have that, make it possible to do business?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fluence has been a terrific partner. Obviously I'm pretty familiar with the team over there. Right. But we really look for differentiated partners that we can help integrate into systems. One of the biggest challenges we had at Fluence when I was there working on the direct team was understanding how, helping customers understand how switching out lighting, as an example, like retrofits, or adding in a new type of lighting at a different light intensity, how that affected things or the rest of their cultivation, how it affected post-harvest, how it affected the HVAC system, things like that, irrigation rates. And one thing that I really enjoyed about Urban-gro and what we've been able to do is we tie it all together, and we can help customers understand how adding more light intensity and more watts will affect their HVAC and require some tweaks on their HVAC design. Maybe it's the control system on the HVAC and how it's cycling, the irrigation system, watering rates, how those change. And so we're able to help customers really get a full picture of any equipment partner that we bring in, how that'll impact the rest of their grow, and really, again, kind of de-risk it for them in a big way on that side.
When you're vetting suppliers or manufacturing partners, what are you looking for in terms of qualities? I mean, I'm sure that with supply chain issues right now, availability has got to be a big one.
Yeah. Lead time is huge, and it always has been. I mean, over the last, as I'm sure you know, the last 6 months, it's been crazy. So finding partners that have, a stable, consistent supply that doesn't get or doesn't see any reduction in quality, even when supply chain gets impacted, has been a really big one. But on the same token, we're trying to find partners who are going to be there for a long time, for the life. If you're buying a piece of equipment and it's going to be warranted for 5 years through us, we want to make sure that the manufacturer is going to be a going concern for 5 years. And that and supply chain really go hand in hand. What we found is that the larger, kind of more established groups, they're able to much better kind of cope with these supply chain challenges. So that's why we work closely with Argus, another pretty large group in the space for EC side. We try to find partners that have a proven track record and that are big enough to be around and serve the space and warranty their products for a long time.
Have you guys been hit with any supply chain problems that have disrupted your workflow?
Here and there, one of the big benefits of working with all these groups and establishing these close relationships is that I think we do get, kind of preferential treatment in a lot of ways on projects that we're working on. So our partners have been able to kind of benefit on that side of things, which I'm really excited about. Delays here and there, absolutely. A couple extra days in port, a couple extra delays, days delay from some steel getting pushed out, something like that. But overall, we've been able to cope pretty well. Just hoping it doesn't continue too long. It's definitely, everything's a little bit on edge as we get big orders in.
From your Q3 results this year and your Q3 results last year, I saw that you have had 120%, 119% growth. That's an incredible year during a pretty trying time. To what do you attribute that success? Is it just that cannabis is hot and staying hot right now?
Well, I think I think we've done a really good job at kind of adjusting to the market, understanding what our customers really want and value, and then adapting to that. Like I mentioned, we acquired the MEP division and branch 2-3 years ago, and then it's kind of ramped up from there. We acquired the architectural firm just a few months back. So we've really been kind of listening to what our customers want and responding and making the adjustments to expand our offerings from there. We've hired really aggressively over the last year. We uplisted to NASDAQ, which has been a really incredible opportunity, and we're just moving full speed ahead. But yeah, the market's definitely a lot better than it was, year and a half ago too. So that's a rising boat lifts all, or a rising tide lifts all boats. So that definitely helps. With the aggressive hiring,
are you hiring people from the cannabis industry? Or are you going outside the industry to fill those roles?
That's another one that there's always, there's so much merit to both sides. I think it's just such a unique industry to hire for, because it's so hard to hire people that really have a tremendous amount of cannabis experience. I think we've had a lot of success hiring from just general ag, group guys and gals that have experience in cannabis, but maybe not just cannabis. We just brought on Brett Cherniak. He's our VP of sales, but he came from Grodan. So he has a whole bunch of experience working with a lot of the groups that we work with all the time, but then also working with a lot of these big greenhouse commercial ag growers, the ones in the Netherlands. Bringing some of that experience into cannabis is something that we really try to do. And then also we're hiring, we have a whole architectural division that has become really competent and experienced in cannabis, but they're all from, general architecture, just like how our MEP division came from general HVAC and became immersed in cannabis. So, we believe in both. We see the value of both. And we think that, people are really excited and passionate about the space. It's pretty cool to be able to bring them in and let them apply skills from other industries to, this one that's just a little bit different.
Do you see more growth via acquisition in the near term?
I can't be the one to, officially say, I don't have too much line of sight into that, to be honest. I think we're flexible. One of the cool things about being at Urban-gro, like I said, is that we really do listen to our customers and try to understand where we're delivering value and where our customers, can be helped. So I think there are some other areas that could come up. But, we're really focusing on kind of that first mile and design service and becoming turnkey and able to help customers start to finish and offer a comprehensive package.
When you're listening to customers, what's the question that you hear the most often?
No, there are a lot of them. The first one is always kind of like you mentioned, how much is this going to cost? How much does it cost to build a facility? And that again, I think is where we come in and just say, it depends what you want to build. It depends what your goals are. But our job and what we strive to do is make sure that every dollar you do spend is the most effective way to do it. Whether it's because you're getting the best deal on equipment that you're spending that dollar on, or because you're allocating it towards the best service or best strategy. We want to make sure that customers are allocating dollars as effectively as possible.
What's the most profitable facility that you've worked on, and what has had the best production? Are they the same?
I don't know offhand, but I would guess probably not the same, which is actually kind of interesting. And I think it's because, and it goes to show, market is so much more important than the output of your operation. There are some guys in California that grow some incredible product, do it consistently, high yields, ultra efficiently, low cost, but their price per pound is so low, especially over the last 4 or 6 months as things have been kind of impacted, that they're not close to the most profitable. And then we have other operators that don't go as high dollar per square foot on the build out. They're not going for that, Ferrari, back to the car analogy. They're going more for a Toyota Camry, but because they're in a market that's incredible, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, something like that, they're able to, the speed to market that they get with that Camry and just being able to get product out there makes them so profitable that, they will oftentimes outperform an operation that's much more efficient. So yeah, it just depends on location and geography, and market more than anything.
Do you ever find yourself talking a customer into a Camry and telling them to scale to the Ferrari once the market changes?
Yeah, I think, I try to stay away from official recommendations. I like to say that I try to, share the pros and cons that I see with both options. I think what happens more often is that customers kind of come to the realization that they want, everyone wants a Ferrari. Everyone thinks they wants a Ferrari, or everyone thinks they want a Ferrari. But then when it comes down to it, you start looking at price, you start looking at what you really get out of that Ferrari, time to market, then the Camry makes more sense. And so usually what happens is customers kind of come to that conclusion on their own when that does happen. But some people, really want the Ferrari and will help you build the fastest Ferrari you want. So
do you run into more challenges with clients that are from within the cannabis industry, or do you run into more challenges with outside money?
There's always, there's so much, another great question. These are all fantastic. We see both sides of it. A lot of times, the cannabis, the really kind of experienced cannabis guys will be coming at it with a kind of, I like to call it like an early era scaled up basement. Coming from the gray market, it can be challenging for some people to adapt to new technology if they're familiar working with something. Whereas investors, I think the challenge is if they're, it's just a new group that has no cannabis experience, they sometimes don't, they'll sometimes miss out on the difficulty of actually dealing with plants. If you're looking at it as an investor that's never worked in ag, it can be challenging to really understand how many things can go wrong in a cultivation facility. So I think there are different challenges coming at it from both sides. The other kind of group that we see switching into cannabis is the commercial ag growers, the big like tomato, leafy green, and they kind of they come at it with a little bit of a different way where they understand the challenges of growing and growing plants, but they also have kind of this mindset of OpEx is the most important. And, when you're dealing with the crop that gets a couple dollars a pound and then switching to one that's $2,000, $3,000 a pound, it's just a little bit of a reframing of thinking on inputs really. And so, I think there are different challenges associated with different groups that are coming in with mindsets, from other industries.
Do you do specifically cultivation, or do you go into the processing, any of the food manufacturing, anything like that?
We've been partly through the architectural firm. MJ12 does a lot of kind of dispensaries and kitchens adjacent to cultivation. We've started ramping up post-harvest and processing offerings a little bit more, in large part just because, that all kind of comes back to your design spec, what you're trying to grow, what you're trying to deliver into your market. And, yeah, it's kind of the final piece in the puzzle. So we have started ramping that up a little bit, doing things like extraction equipment. And again, our architectural firm will do kitchens, extraction facilities, dispensaries, that kind of thing. So it's something we're branching into a little bit more, mainly because our customers are, kind of asking for support in those areas as we help them on the cultivation side.
You left college to get into the cannabis industry. I have to imagine that there had to be some sort of personal connection to the cannabis industry that brought you into it. Is there one?
Not, honestly, not really. I'm not a huge user. I like it, but I think what it really was is it was kind of the LED experience. I realized that, like I said, LEDs had taken over normal lighting, and horticulture was kind of only a matter of time. And so, when I realized how big the market share of HPS for cultivation facilities was, in cannabis, but then also in commercial ag, I just realized that eventually LEDs were going to, dramatically reshape the industry. And once I kind of got immersed in it and saw that play out, I just fell in love with how dynamic the industry is, and how, everyone does come in with kind of a different story, different background, different expertise, and we're all kind of learning together. So no, it's nothing in particular about cannabis, but ag in general. I just love the kind of challenge of growing plants consistently and dealing with all the challenges that arise from it.
How does Urban-gro prepare for potential states that might come online next? Are they forward looking, or is it sort of the same process is going to work regardless of state?
Yeah, I mean, price compression is definitely something we're looking at. These new states don't see it quite as much. That is something we're focused on more in mature markets. But these new states, everyone knows that price compression is going to happen. They're going to start out with a high price per pound and it's going to drop. And so speed to market is a big thing that we're trying to really focus on. Obviously, being able to offer innovative technology at competitive rates helps in that. But one thing that we've done to enhance speed to market is really launch financing solutions for our customers. What we'll find is that a lot of growers will raise money, build a facility, or 80% of a facility, and then when the time comes to buy HVAC or lighting, they either don't have the capital to do it comfortably without taking on dilution, or they just don't have a way to raise the money, even if they know it'll pay off once they start generating revenue through yield. Even if they know that there's an ROI, they just might not have the cash to do it and put in that extra infrastructure. A good example of that is paying more for LEDs that are going to be able to yield higher through higher light intensity. Even if you can justify it on paper, if you can't make it to the point, spend the money and make it to the point where you recognize that increased revenue, it's not worth it, and are not viable. And so we've really ramped up financing solutions. I don't know if you saw, but we just partnered with Excess Capital. And so, we're really kind of that's in a response to being able to help groups get to market faster. And in large part because of these new states, we're seeing that race happen every time one of these new states goes online.
How does the partnership work with Excess Capital?
So they will do all kind of the vetting and risk assessment on their own. We will work with customers, do kind of a little bit of just kind of pre-qualification. And then if customers are interested in financing solutions, we just put them in touch and they kind of run with it on their own. Excess in general is looking for pretty established operators. So again, it's more the MSO that's operating in, let's say, California and Nevada, and then wants to go into Michigan and start a new facility. That's a good fit for them, something like that. But, on the same token, we're actively, we understand the importance of financing for startup phase operations also, and we're actively kind of pursuing strategies to help address that and help support customers like that too. So, it's dynamic, and financing in the space is always a little bit of a kind of one-off. It's always approached a little bit as a one-off, just because there's so many moving parts based on geography and all that. But definitely something we're focusing on and ramping up a lot over the next few months.
In the event of federal legalization, how does that stand to impact your business?
It depends, a little bit unclear. I would say, it depends a little bit on how it's implemented. Is cross-state, are operators going to be able to move product across state lines, or is it going to be still pretty restricted within the state? In general, I think as a company, we're really excited about legalization and things becoming more opened up. We think that it's a long time before interstate commerce comes online, but we're excited for everything that can come with legalization. I think there's just going to be a lot more opportunity in general.
If cost isn't an issue, what are some of the innovative technologies that you're most excited about when it comes to cultivation?
Yeah, another great question. I think like you said, some of the sensor, some of the AI stuff, I think that could get really, really interesting. We're definitely keeping an eye on a lot of that and doing some, kind of preliminary work in that on that side of things. So I think, yeah, that'll be a huge piece of it. Sensors, AI, taking humans out of the equation. And on the same note, I think automation equipment, automation systems that are kind of built for post-harvest, but then even through cultivation and operation, I think automation is going to become a much, much bigger deal in the space over the next couple of years, especially as price compression happens in more of these mature markets.
Now, I might have heard you wrong, but I believe you said free photons are your favorite type.
Yeah, they are. They are.
How do you get those free photons?
So, the sunlight. The sunlight's a great way to do it. I love greenhouse. I love indoor. The challenge with greenhouse is obviously you don't always get those free photons. They're great when you're getting them, but they're when you're not getting them, they're not good at all. And then also environmental control is a lot more challenging. With the changes in sunlight and temperature outside, it's a lot harder to control your environment inside. And I've seen we've seen a whole bunch of greenhouse growers try to add equipment and infrastructure to address that, but the kind of trade-off and challenge always becomes, if you put enough equipment into a greenhouse, it just becomes an indoor facility with a bad R&U factor, bad insulation. And so, it's always kind of a trade-off between, what you're trying to produce, what your inputs are, and what your budget is. And that's why that first kind of initial design and vetting process is so important to make sure that we're, all aligned on goals and setting out from the start with the right endpoint in mind.
Now that you're in the industry, are you a cannabis industry lifer, or do you like to keep your options open?
I would like to stay in commercial ag. I think cannabis is terrific. It's from a financial standpoint, it's really interesting just how valuable this crop is, and how differentiated it is. It's not like corn where it's a commodity. But I think general ag and a lot of these indoor vertical farms are going to become really, really interesting over the next few years. Food production is only going to get more important. People are starting to care more about the quality of their food and their vegetables. And the premiums that we're seeing people pay on indoor grown lettuce and arugula, things like that. It's not matching cannabis, but it's definitely kind of going in the right direction where more equipment is going to get more viable. So I think I would like to stay in ag. Ag as a whole it's so dynamic and so interesting that I think I would like to stay in it.
As you are juggling, food production and cannabis cultivation projects, is there ever any confusion in terms of like when you're managing all these different projects?
Yeah, well, it's all about, again, that's where it goes back to what I said, where I think all these systems are essentially trying to achieve the same thing. You're trying to understand how much you can charge for your end product, what it takes to make that end product, and then what your capex is to set up that facility. And so, yeah, there are definitely some changes on how much light intensity you want for lettuce or tomatoes, or how much, how you lay out the canopy, stuff like that. But we always really try to make every project bespoke, and based on customer goals. And it's just a very different, the financial inputs are just very different for lettuce. But other than that, I think it's best to have them be treated kind of the same way, because you're trying to do the same thing out of both of them at the end of the day.
Okay. What are your predictions for the industry? Let's just say in the near term, the next year, 5 years. What do you foresee happening? Is it federal legalization?
I think federal is probably a little ways off. Maybe I'm just pessimistic about how slow things move in government, but I think that's probably a few years off. And then when it does happen, like I said, interstate commerce, all these states spent so much time developing their own regulatory system. I think the last thing they're going to want to do is let the tax dollars go somewhere else, or let one big state and facility that produces a ton in like Denver or something be able to ship all over. So I think states are going to probably restrict interstate commerce. Over the next year, I think we're going to see a lot of commoditization on products, actual cannabis and flower prices in a lot of these more mature states. But I think we're also going to see a lot of commoditization on equipment. Lights are a good example. There's a lot of more LED options than you had 3 years ago, and they look a lot more similar than they did 3 years ago. And we're seeing that across the board. Benches, fans, all that is becoming more commoditized. But for us, that's kind of an exciting opportunity, because it allows us to just become more equipment agnostic and really focus on that design spec and say, look, we'll help you guys get to where you want to be. Let's focus on the design, and we'll make sure that you get the best option on equipment. And we can essentially help you guys leverage the commoditization to get the best price on everything. So yeah, I think that's probably a lot of what I see is just general commoditization in the industry.
Before we get out of here, I always like to ask, is there anything that we might have left out or anything in particular you'd like the audience to know about Urban-gro or yourself personally?
No, nothing in particular, but yeah, if there's anything we can help with, feel free to reach out. We, like I said, we can treat it as kind of a turnkey or an a la carte menu, and we're always happy to chat about, like I said, just pros and cons of different cultivation equipment decisions, strategy decisions, that kind of thing. Yeah, we love this stuff, and we're always happy to chat.
Excellent. Well, Mitch, thank you very much for joining me today, man. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure, David. I appreciate you taking the time.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You'd also help us out a lot by leaving us a positive review. If you want to recommend somebody for a future podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. Finally, make sure you subscribe to the Cannabis Equipment News newsletter at cannabisequipmentnews.com. Make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first. All right, again, for Mitch, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.